Everybody, I am super excited to introduce you to Reimena Yee, who is coming in for this interview from Australia. That's where she is right now. And Reimena, you are one of the creators that I have admired from a distance for a really, really long time because first of all, as an artist, you're really a visionary and you have such a strong and distinctive style. I really admire to me, you seem very influenced by what I would call the applied arts. Like there's a lot of decorative elements to the way that you do your art, which I absolutely love the applied arts. So I'm super, super into that. And then also, I really love your blog. I have mentioned it to people inside of Kids Comics Unite, and I often point people to your website as being an example of just a really incredible artist website because it has so much to offer for so many different types of people. So for a long, long time, I'm like a total fangirl, you can tell here. But anyway, I've been wanting to talk to you. And so now it's finally happened. And we haven't done one of these industry interviews in a long time. I was doing them a lot during 2021. And I did a couple at the beginning of this year, but I haven't done it in a while. So it feels like, we're back to something really, really special. So just to sort of formally introduce you, Reimena, I'm going to sort of go off your online bio. Reimena Yee is a strange and fancy graphic novelist, illustrator, and designer. Originally from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, she's now based in Melbourne, Australia. She's the author-illustrator of The World in Deeper Inspection, The Carpet Merchant of Constantinia, and Seance Tea Party, among other books and webcomics and many other things. She is also the co-founder of Unnamed, a grassroots comics collective for visual literacy creators in Southeast Asia. And she works part-time as an editor at Hiveworks Comics, a webcomic studio publisher. So, Reimena, you do a lot of things. You have a webcomic, you publish graphic novels, and you have a day job on top of all that. So maybe you could just start off by giving us a little bit of a background about yourself and about the projects that you're working on now.
All right. Thanks for the really sweet introduction. And it's nice to know that my half-completed website is something that's worth sharing. But man, I really should continue working on that and finish it. But anyway, so as Janna kindly explained, I'm a strange and fancy Australian cartoonist. I make comics because that's where my style of storytelling is most suited. So I originally wanted to be a prose novelist since I was a kid, and I still do, but I realized a lot of my writing is very visually focused. So, I was already drawing as a kid, and I thought, well, it would be easier to just draw the story. As a lot of fellow artists would know, that's not always the case. So, visually innovative like webcomics, like Emily Carroll's horror webcomics, and Tess Stone's Hannah is Not a Boy's Name, solidified in my mind the potential for ambitious, stylish, experimental work. And I think like comics present storytelling devices that aren't possible in any other medium. So that's more or less how I got into comics.
You're actually the second comics artist that I've talked to who told me that they actually wanted to be a prose novelist, but then comics was easier, which is funny because anybody who works in comics would know it's not really easier at all. The other person is Andy Watson. Andy
Oh,
Watson
Andy. Yeah.
wants to write a novel as well. So were you a med student originally, or were you studying science or something like that?
Yeah, I was studying science, but uh, I mean, mostly because it was for practical reasons. Because, like in Malaysia, there's not really a supportive environment uh, uh, of pursuing arts as a career.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very difficult to like financially support yourself on uh, like just making art solely. So uh, like my family uh, asked me to like study like uh, something else uh, just to support my interest in art.
Mm-hmm.
So I I was a science student for most of my academic career, from high school to university. And yeah, so that's what I did. Uh but then I realized that uh, I was studying to be a psychologist. So
Mm.
I wanted to pursue academia, like one of my interests topics was on the psychology of religion. So uh like how like say a structure like a church or a mosque can help facilitate better mental health among its community, that kind of thing. But and I'm more or less kind of still interested in the thing, but I
Yeah.
realized that I felt that I wasn't really suited to academia as like an industry, you know, like the things that they ask you to do in order to get funding, in order to get published, etc., etc. I'm like, no thanks. So,
Yeah.
so like I, so like sometime during the last year of my degree, I just like, okay, I should like really try really hard to make this like this comics thing work, and uh thank God it did.
So,
a lot of
oh my
it just
gosh,
luck. Yeah.
you're saying so many things that are so interesting to me. So first of all, I should say I was also in a academic career track. I was going to get my PhD, and
Mm.
also found myself very like just unable to envision myself being stuck in an archive and working by myself on, academic writing for
Mm-hmm.
the rest of my career.
Mm-hmm.
But I was gonna say that, so how did you make that transition? You said you were lucky that in your last year of schooling you were able to make that transition into
Yeah.
reading comics. What exactly happened?
Uh, I mean, while I was studying, I was always like working on my comics. So I had my web comic, The World in Deeper Inspection,
Mm-hmm.
which I write and publish online from time to time whenever I'm free.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, while I was studying in university, I was working on The Carpet Merchant of Constantinia. So uh, so I was posting that for a couple of years, and then uh, like in like during the time when I was making the second and last book, I was nominated for the Eisner for Best Digital Comic, and that was a pretty big deal. Yeah, so and on the strength of The Carpet Merchant, I was able to secure an agent, a literary
Mm-hmm.
agent, Janna,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and then I was able to also parlay that into The Carpet Merchant getting a book deal. I mean, it's not really a book deal. It's like I had to crowdfund it in order to publish it, but still, a publisher was going to turn it into a book. So that was great. And at the same time, I also managed to secure like a deal with Penguin Random House to do Seance Tea Party and the upcoming My Aunt is a Monster. So there was everything all happening like more or less around the same time. So that was why I say it was luck, because a lot of it was like being at the right place at the right time. But at the same time, I was really like trying to push to make this kind of thing happen for the past 2 years before it did. So yeah.
So when you were publishing your webcomic that won the Eisner,
we didn't win it, it was nominated.
Oh, it was nominated. Okay.
Yeah.
How were you promoting it? Were you just publishing it on your own website and then promoting it on social media, or was it on another platform?
So the Cupboard Merchant of Constantinia was published on my own website.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same website where the World in Deeper Inspection is hosted.
Mm-hmm.
I have been maintaining that site since I was 18.
Mm-hmm.
So like whenever I post something there, I would just mention it on my social media. So I'll mention it on Twitter, I'll mention it on Tumblr, but otherwise I didn't do really much to promote it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think a lot of the attention came around the time when I finished book 1 of The Cupboard Merchant, and then also at the end of book 2.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about the book that you're working on now, which is coming out soon?
I unfortunately do not have the physical version of My Aunt is a Monster due to some issues, but so I have a new kids graphic novel coming out. It's called My Aunt is a Monster. It's a adventure comedy about this girl, Safia. She's a dreamer. She loves books. She wants to go on adventures like her favorite protagonists. But a tragic accident then leads her to an unexpected meeting with a reclusive, distant aunt she never knew existed, who happened to be formerly the world's greatest adventurer, Lady Rimsey. But Lady Rimsey has a terrible secret, and it's in the title of the book. And this secret prevents her from going out into the world, which effectively like ended her career, and sent her into self-exile. But one day, Lady Rimsey finds out that her arch nemesis has uncovered an ancient kingdom, a lost ancient kingdom, and Lady Rimsey does not want that to happen for reasons that will be explained in the book. So Lady Rimsey is forced to go out into the world, forced to go back out into adventure, and she brings Safia along, and like Safia is excited, like her dream is finally coming true, but then of course adventuring is not all fun and games. There are always going to be like bad guys about, and it turns out that it's not just Lady Rimsey who's after the arch nemesis. It's also agents from the Bureau of Suspicious Intent. So Safia unknowingly befriends one of those agents, a moody teenager, and of course from there, lots of strange and wondrous hijinks ensue.
Yes. So I know with a lot of your books, or maybe with everything that you do a lot of research, and you're very influenced by art history. So with this particular book, are there any particular motifs or something different that you did in the art style than you've done in previous projects?
So visually for My Aunt is a Monster, actually I think visually and narratively for My Aunt is a Monster, it's a return to form for me, because I used to have a particular way of drawing and writing when I was a teenager. I was always like making like nonsensical, whimsical like stuff, and my style was more like inspired by vintage illustration, especially the golden books. So I hadn't really like worked in that space for so long. So with with My Aunt is the Monster, I just went back to my roots. I pushed my style a bit more, and I tried to be a bit more like loose and silly with the writing. Like it's not meant to be super serious anyway. So it's like whatever. But it doesn't mean that I didn't really like do my research, because the protagonist, Safia, she's blind. So with that comes like a consideration for her, like her disability and how she navigates the world with that disability and her own perspective and her such like things. So I did my research. I consulted a couple of people. One of them is a blind author, and another is a professional who works with blind children. And then I consulted on my own like online communities created by blind and visually impaired like people. Like on Reddit, there's a strong community, and on YouTube, there's also a community of like YouTubers who are blind and visually impaired, who play games, who stream, who talk about their lives. So that was where I got my like this is how I built my basis for how I represent Safia. But of course, you know, it's not always complete. So I'm always learning every day.
And I know that one thing that you do that I appreciate so much is that you talk a lot about your process. So you put it on your blog and you put it on Twitter. Is that something that you've basically just been doing ever since you started posting your work online? Or did you start posting about your process because people were asking you about it and you realized that it would be helpful to do that?
I guess I've always been doing it from the beginning, because when I started getting into comics when I was like 13, like seriously into comics when I was 13, there weren't a lot of like resources on making comics online back then. And especially resources that's like geared specifically to someone who's living outside of a culture or a country which has no access to like a support structure like the Western world has, you know, like grants or conventions, festivals, a robust publishing industry, art schools, museums, libraries, you know, that kind of thing. Like there wasn't a lot of that in Malaysia, and it's still not very much here either. But my peers and I really had to like, you know, make up something along the way as we were making our own comics. And I always remember how frustrated I was and how like lost I was, because I had nothing to ground me, and I learned everything from the ground. So from the ground up. So nowadays, you know, just to make sure the next generation doesn't have to go through all that trouble, I I make my process and my thoughts available for free and like easily on my platforms, And fortunately, a lot of artists have been doing that as well. So it's great.
Mm-hmm. Can you tie that in with what you do with the Unnamed Collective? Can you tell us a little more about what that is and what you do with that?
So our name is right now it's a casual, loose network of comics professionals and amateurs around Southeast Asia. So we connect people from different countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, and the rest of ASEAN. We connect them on the Facebook page and we share resources and we share job opportunities. We share knowledge and all that kind of thing because, as previously mentioned, there are not a lot of like resources that are like catered towards artists in our region. So that's what we are, and we also organize like panels and workshops and outreach. But because of the pandemic, for the past 2 years, we have been on hiatus, so there's not really much that's happening right now. But hopefully, it'll come back to life soon.
So, just out of curiosity, are creators in, or actually even readers in Southeast Asia, are the type of comics that are popular basically across the board, like manga and then Western comics and French comics, or are there would you say that certain cultures of comics are more popular than others?
Definitely manga for Southeast Asia in general, mostly because of our proximity to the rest of East Asia, and that's the majority of our media consumption. We consume a lot of like media from Japan and Korea and China, India, So that's where we get our stuff from. And the thing about manga is that it's really cheap to print. So it's a lot more accessible to a lot of people in Southeast Asia because there's not because books are expensive in general, especially comics. Comics are really expensive. So because of that, there's a lot more people who are more familiar with manga. But of course, it doesn't mean that there are avid readers who read Western comics as well.
So I assume that webcomics must be growing a lot.
Yeah, webtoons.
Yeah. Hold on, I'm pulling up my questions because I had some specific things I wanted to ask you about.
Yes.
So I guess I wanted to ask you about the specific blog post that you wrote that is called All the Things That Mean Nothing. And in that blog post, you said that due to your appreciation for the internet as a public service, lifelong involvement in digital art, and belief in and gratitude for the original purpose of the internet as a library, archive, and commons, you haven't been too impressed by the hype around blockchain and NFTs. And as I said to you in the email, I'm not interested in talking about NFTs.
Yeah.
But I'm super interested in what you said about the purpose of the internet as an archive and as a commons. And also about the internet or your work on the internet as a public service, which is really what you were just describing to us. So what would you say about what gives you hope for the future of art and the future of humanity even, and what inspires you, or what are you excited about when you look into the future for comics and yourself?
Wow, that's a really big question. Okay. Okay, so to talk a bit about like internet as like commons, I guess. So like for me, when I think about the internet and when I think about like comics inside the internet, it's like, so the internet is like a public service in the sense that, you know, in the sense of how like bird watchers and buskers and market stores and passerbys would like use a park. Like, you know, all us in this park, we are not being directly funded by it, but we are transforming in our own little ways a space that is being funded by hopefully a public institution or pro-social organization. But of course, as we've all come to realize nowadays, the park has going to become very corporatized and balkanized, you know, so that they can be developed as symbols of so-called progress, like skyscrapers or statues of billionaires or whatever. And the baskets have become Uberized, you know, like we all become like gig workers now. And that's very dire when you think about it. But despite that, I don't think that it's all hopeless, because the internet is not as small as the park, you know, it's the whole world. So there are still spaces online out there that are untouched by algorithms or the limits of venture capitalist platforms. And these spaces are full of like developers, creatives, and like online surfers who are very open to possibility, who are like radicalized for change and for, you know, for bringing like social good to the rest of society. So we have this thing called the indie rap movement, which more or less it is more or less a movement that is trying to reclaim the internet as like as a space that users can control and can set their own boundaries, set their own like rules and such thing, you know. And related to that, we have NeoCities, which is kind of like GeoCities in that it lets people create their own website about anything they want, you know, so they can make shrines about their favorite anime character, or like document like niche knowledge. So NeoCities is thriving right now. It's like there's also a lot of like comics, a lot of like games, and a lot of like I guess right now they would call it virtual reality experience, but I guess it's just for like clicking the website and like just exploring the theme park, I guess, that the creator of the website has created. And like it's really fun to see all this stuff. But the thing about this kind of thing is that it's much harder to find these places, and it's perhaps even harder to acclimatize to the kind of environment that this kind of thing thrives in, you know, because it's like it's for a smaller audience. There's no algorithm, there's no discovery function. Like you really have to depend a lot on your own initiative and on your own community as well to help lift you up. And that can be quite difficult to adjust, especially after years of having to like divine what the algorithm wants, or even the desires of a consumptive, you know, content hungry market. But honestly, after like wandering around in those spaces for a bit, it provides a kind of peace that I won't trade for anything else.
What are the names of some of those that you mentioned? Is it Neo cities? Is that what you said?
Yeah, typing it on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to ask everybody here, is there anybody who would like to ask Reimena a question?
Yes, you can ask me about comics or graphic novels or like, the craft of making visual narratives or like anything that I've written about, history and research and all that. So
I think Brigitte put a question. And then I'm not sure if I missed a question in the chat, so I guess I'll try and scroll up. But Brigitte said, how do you usually plan out your graphic novel when you get an idea for a story?
Okay, so usually a lot of my ideas come as like an image in my head first. So when that image comes, I usually let it sit for a bit, because what I've realized is that if I'm still not thinking about that image or that idea, like a year later, it's not a strong enough idea. It still needs time to bake, or at least, just to let go of the idea. So if I am still obsessed by that image, I turn it into a book, I guess. I start actually like thinking about how to turn that image to a story. So wait, give me a second. So like a lot of my process, especially in the early stages, is thinking and experiencing, which can look a lot like doing nothing, and it looks unexciting or irrelevant to the actual like physical or mental labor of writing or drawing. So I have developed my own story outline and production method. It's called the onion method. It's in my blog too. So the onion method is basically like, so you have two major elements: a character-driven plot and a thematic thesis that riffs off each other. So by riffing off each other, they create like alternating layers, each in conversation with the previous and the next layer. So others have described this outline method as a Socratic dialogue, or you arguing to yourself to make the strongest narrative that you possibly can. Not the most logical or the most plot hole proof story, just the one that is intellectually and like creatively rigorous, and as honest and true to the spirit of what you are and what you want to say with that story. So this onion method sounds really intense, but to bring this back, it consists a lot of like doing nothing while the onion develops. So like that's how I work on my ideas. And the onion method, it's not something that you can do in a single sitting. It's something you have to do like for as long as the story needs to percolate in your mind. So like if Seon's Tea Party, it only took like a few months, I guess, maybe 2 or 3. Whereas with The Carpet Merchant, especially book 2, it took a year and a half of like just constantly like trying to turn it around, trying to figure out the character, figure out the history, and figure out like how what I want to explore fits in with the character development and the team and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's just I mean, it's both intense and kind of chill at the same time. Yeah.
Amber, I saw your question, but first I'll ask Josh since you have your hand raised. Josh.
Hey, I was wondering about your experience working with an editor. I assume that you did not work with an editor on your web comics, and then with your published books, you've worked with an editor. What was the main takeaway for you, and do you have a preference on which way to work?
So I think like one's experience with an editor really depends a lot on your chemistry and how well the editor understands what you're trying to achieve. So I've had experiences before where I've worked with an editor who doesn't really get what I'm trying to do, and sometimes that's fine, but a lot of it really depends on their framing and how they communicate like any like feedback to you. So, but then a lot of it sometimes is also due to personality. So I've been very fortunate so far that 99% of the editors that I've worked with have been they know what I'm about. So it's been really easy and really transformative working with them, because I find it really useful to have someone else to bounce ideas off and to see whether or not my onion is strong enough. Yeah. You know, like I gotta throw the onion at them and make sure it doesn't like explode, or fall into pieces. So I find it really useful, but of course not every story that you do needs an editor. Like with my current webcomic right now, Alexander, the Servant and the Water Alive, there's not a really strong like editorial voice onto it. It's mostly just me, and then I have my friend who also works in the editor, but she is only there to make sure that the story makes sense. But there's not a lot of like editorial control on like where the story goes and that sort of thing. So, but that's the kind of project that Alexander is. I wouldn't really like do the same thing for something like Seance Tea Party or My Aunt is a Monster. So yeah.
Thanks. Amber, do you want to ask your question? Can you unmute?
Sure.
Yay.
Hi again. So yeah, I'm always interested in sort of the heritage and the lineage of artists. And you look at some big artists' work and you can see the influence of the art, the artists that came before them. And then I love to look up that artist and who came before them and kind of look at that lineage on the way back. So I'm always interested to see, know what you read and what inspired you and what your artistic lineage is.
Okay. So I guess if you were to ask me now, I'll answer it really differently than if you were to ask me maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, because things have changed a lot since then. But when I started like pursuing art seriously when I was a teenager, I was really inspired by New Game, Dave McKean. I'm going to type their names here, don't worry, later. And I was very inspired by like animation and illustration from the 50s to 60s onward, especially the UPA style animation, which is like, it's like really abstract, really stylized, flat characters. So like, I really like that. And I also was inspired by French comics and French animation. So at that time, there was The Revised Cat, and what else? Nocturne. That was one of the movies. And yeah, that's all I can think of right now back then. Oh yeah, and the illustrator Chris Riddell. So I really like that. And of course, my most favorite book back then as a teenager was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. That was the one that inspired me to do my first webcomic, The World in Deeper Inspection, and made me realize that the kind of thing I like was something that can be published, you know? So that was great. But nowadays, I mean, it's still more or less the same, a little bit of the same thing as before, but I've expanded my inspiration pool now. So nowadays, I'm really like interested in the what they would call the new wave of Hollywood, you know, during the 70s and the 80s when the studio system collapsed. So there were a lot of directors and such who were making like groundbreaking movies. So you have especially from Europe as well. So you have movies like Federico Fellini's The Satyricon and Suspiria and all those really stylish, really really like interesting like really story driven like movies. So I like that. And then and as mentioned really early in the conversation, I take a lot of like inspiration now from the applied arts. So I look at decorative arts, you know, so things like textiles and paints, you know, like how an artisan back then would paint, say, a plate, or how they would carve a spoon. So I take a lot of inspiration from that across like all times in history. The culture really depends on what I'm studying right now. So right now I'm looking at the applied arts in ancient Greece and Egypt and Mesopotamia. So that's my circle right now in terms of the applied arts.
You must be really fun to visit a museum with.
Okay, yeah, but the only thing that nerves me is that I have really like bad memory. So like I can read a lot and I can sort of remember things, but if you ask me to remember something specifically, I cannot tell you, you know. So like yeah.
Do you tend to sketch a lot? Like if you bring a sketchbook with you and just jot down drawings wherever you go, or do you do it at home?
Wait. So it depends. I don't always bring a sketchbook to the museum. Like I only do so when I actually need to look at an object and see how big it is, you know, and how it looks like at 360 degrees, because that's the kind of thing that you cannot see on the digital archive of a museum. So that's when I would bring a sketchbook. But otherwise, when I go to the museum, I just try to be present there. I try to enjoy like what's being displayed and to read as much of the what's that called, the tag that describes what the thing is. So and if I find something interesting, I'll just take a picture of it so I can look it up later.
Do you travel a lot?
I would love to travel more, but obviously due to reasons I can't. But yeah, I've only just started to recently like travel for myself in 2017 when I went to Spain for the first time on my own to do the Camino de Santiago, which is a pilgrimage that's been going on for thousands of years now. That was and is still being undertaken by pilgrims from all over the world to go to the very western end of Spain to see the what's that? See, I'm losing words right now, but basically, apparently the body of Saint James, disciple, was interred in one of the cathedrals there. So that was the main reason why the pilgrimage was a thing. But nowadays, it's both spiritual and also for like secular reasons, such as like, you know, like cycling there and like just doing the pilgrimage just to be part of the history. So that was what I did. And then in 2018 I went to the US, and in 2019 I went to England. So that was what I did before the pandemic. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Okay, bye.
Hello.
Yeah, because I placed this question later on up in the chat, but
sorry. Thanks, Alberto.
No, but it's okay. I rephrase it because I know Reimena is from Southeast Asia, and obviously I'm always interested from how people from other continents, other countries do make it into the American market. So my question was along that regard. How did you make it to sell your books and find representation and agents and everything to sell in North America, and how long did it take you, and if there was something that happened along the way that helped you in that regard?
Okay. So the internet is the main reason why I'm able to break into the North American market. I think like because I started really early, like posting online, like I started posting my art when I was 11 or 12 on neopets.com. That was my first ever publication. So I had a lot of time to make friends with fellow artists around my age on DeviantArt, on Neopets, on Tumblr, and then like later on when some of these friends started going to art school, and some of the older friends, they began their career in publishing, you know, whether it's webcomics or graphic novels. I think like things started to come together. So like I think like during 2013 or 2015, somewhere around there, it was when the publishing industry in North America started being started gathering on Twitter. So when I realized just how many editors, how many agents, and how many such and such there are, I made it a point to like follow them just to keep up with the news, not necessarily the network, just to see what's happening in North America. So, and over time, some of these people came to know of my work and they followed me back, you know, and so year after year, it just wrote and became into like a ball until eventually, like when the carpet merchant came along, just things just started like happening. But like during my last year of university, when I said that I was really like gung-ho about trying to make this comics illustration career work, because I didn't want to do psychology anymore. So I did a lot. So I did a lot of research on agents, like the kinds of agents that will want to represent me, and like I was looking at publishers who are open to submissions. So I was like sending queries everywhere, and I was really, really lucky to get my first, my top choice agent. So yeah, and then that's basically how it is. Like again, it's like a lot of it is like maybe years of like being part of and making friends, like genuine friends, with people in North America, and also like, you know, like just doing your own research and like applying yourself to like opportunities, and then also a lot of it also is also your luck, whether or not those things will eventuate. So yes, I mean it's not really like direct practical advice, but this is just like just something to explain how I got here.
I think your answer makes a lot of sense to me. Well, is there anybody who has a last question? Or actually, wait a minute. I feel like Brigitte had a question that that's your username. Brigitte, did you want to say anything?
Oh, nothing too much, although I do want to say that I love your books, and congrats on the recent movie deal. That's really exciting. But yeah, no, I was also super into Neopets back in the day, like in every day, did a lot of art and stuff. So it's really nice to hear that you're also active on the platform back then.
Yes. It's really like interesting to see the adults now who used to play Neopets, like now they're just doing like lots of like really cool creative things. Yeah.
So true.
All right. Well, I would love it if everybody could unmute yourself just to say thank you. I really, really appreciate that you came and talked to us. I feel like it was, I don't know, it just made me want to talk to you even more. And I hope everybody here
nice.
follows you and, you know, buys your books.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks, everyone.
Reimena.